Hello everyone, welcome back to TED Universe Podcast. Last week we talked about the Yoshis, and we will talk about the Yoshis again this week. So, if you see, if you remember, Sign the Fourth and Stephen, those were the two emperors, and they were both Yoshis. They went underground and dug tunnels, and they took a bunch of Yoshis and humans with them as the surface world was being bombed by Benon. Sorry, not Benon, Notharingia, which would later become Sinenia. Anyways, as they built these tunnels, they ended up turning into a completely different civilization. They consider themselves Sinenia, but to differentiate them, we'll call them the Yovarian Empire, after the House of Yovarius, which ruled. Okay? Now, let's talk about some of the...
You said underground, it was the House of Yovarius?
Yes. So overground was Yovarius, and the House of Yovarius was founded by Sign the Fourth Yovarius, the first Yoshi Emperor. And also, so do you want to learn more about the way of life underground?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, it was cool because since everything was underground, you could have buildings, but it would be interesting because you would have a building, and let's say this was the bottom floor of the building, okay? Then you could have a passageway to another building, except it's the top floor of that building. Yes. And so one thing that they did is, since they had a lot of energy sources, what they ended up doing is that they had a sort of a subway system, except they had it at many different levels. So like you could like take a train from say here to maybe around here. And then you also had elevators. And basically what this ended up becoming is it ended up being like Duck City in the McGuire Missions book, which is available on Amazon, by the way. Check down in the description. And is there anything you're interested in finding out?
Tell me more about what happened there underground.
Yes, so they went underground, and so you know how up above ground was Sinenia, right?
Yes.
Sinenia was ruled by Stephen Yovarius, but afterwards it was taken over by Louis Nothing. But then what happened was they dug underground. So eventually they're all in like a certain area, which is the agreed escape hatch in case anything went wrong, which it did.
How did the Yoshis rule underground?
They tried to be like they did above ground, except of course they had to adjust to their new environment, right? So as soon as they found like an energy source, because it was warmer down, further down, so they were funneling that energy from the core to power their lights and stuff.
Was there any interesting adaptations that happened to the Yoshis who were underground versus the ones who are above?
The Yoshis kind of stayed the same, but the people ended up being able to, their sleep schedule ended up being changed a lot, actually, because they didn't require the sun anymore, so it became much more flexible. As in, like, there wasn't really a standard for what days were. And also, sometimes the people, it was 1,000 years. So, let's say that this is the continent of Xenon, and then here's Benon. So here's the thing, Benon doesn't allow Yoshis, or really that many people in. So, the underground civilization ended up going really far deep because they realized that there's water here, right? Once they got to the edge of the continent.
Mm-hmm.
So then they went further down and then ended up creating a tunnel, but this is much, much later, all the way to below Benon
Okay.
and other continents because they're right inside of the donut of Tyrannus.
So is there anything interesting, different, anything about the underground world?
So about the underground world, there were so I think they probably ended up having so Sign the Fourth invented the language Sinenian.
Okay.
So except Sinenian ended up changing from Sinenian on the surface a little.
Okay.
Because while Sinenian on the surface ended up having more of a Latin influence because of the Benanese invasion, Sinenian underground ended up keeping more Greek roots because that's what the original Sinenian was.
Okay.
So which one do you think is the real Sinenia? The one that's on the surface that got taken over, or the one that's underground that escaped?
Well, it just seems like all the rulers were called Sign, right?
Not all of them. There's Stephen.
The sun.
Yes.
But most of the rulers were called Sign? The
Yes.
humans as well?
Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily mean because Sign the Fourth went underground that's the real Sinenia.
Well, yeah. But like, it was the Sinenian land, and then they dug a tunnel, so then it's the Sinenian underground,
Mm-hmm.
and then this became taken over by the Notharingians.
Okay,
So
so that
which-
means the ones who went underground is really continuing the Sinenia.
Well, it depends on your opinion. Most people didn't even know that these people existed, so they just considered this the real Sinenia.
Yeah.
Now,
If it's closed off, how did they know the news of anything going on above ground?
not really, because it didn't really affect them that much.
Okay.
Now, they ended up going further underground, but just because it kind of looked cool sometimes, like, let's say that because sometimes they're giant caves that they stumbled upon. And in these caves, like, let's say maybe there's a tunnel passing above, right?
Mm-hmm.
They might actually put like an entrance to a building up here. And then like the rest of it is like inside, kind of submerged. And there might be like supports of the building, you know?
Okay.
But like the building is sort of upside down in a way. And in a sense, this is kind of the first floor. And then you go down from there. And let's say you're the person in this room, and then you can kind of see, you might have a glass floor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it would be pretty cool. Or there could be another building here.
Did the people or Yoshis who were underground, did they build, could they live in the caves versus having to build houses?
Well, they
Maybe
also
like burrows.
Well, they also did build houses, but let's say that, but like the caves would become sort of like different communities in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But there was the first cave that they discovered, which became sort of the capital. and they called it because I guess they're sort of like cities in a way, because there's like a bunch of buildings and stuff, and this one I'm pretty sure was Newport Yovaria. Which is named after the old capital of Sinania up above. Except then, once the people and other Yoshis discovered more of these caves, they ended up like trying to split apart from the Yovarian Empire and making their own civilizations. And at some points, there were wars between these civilizations, right?
Oh.
So let's see how that would pan out, because like for example, let's say there's a civilization over here and it was planning a surprise attack on Newport Yovaria. It could like get to around here, right? It could like dig all the way here, and the people who are living here wouldn't have any idea what's coming for them. But that's just an example. And actually, that has happened a few times with places down here. But one of the cool things about being underground is that, like, sometimes they reach water, and sometimes that's kind of scary because they can get flooded.
Yeah.
But sometimes they do it in a way that's safe. And then, like, if they have a tunnel here, they end up like having a window to the ocean. So then sometimes you can see that. And actually, sometimes a lot of very expensive, and they have to use a very strong type of glass that can withstand that. And sometimes, like, if there's a ladder here, you can have a very expensive house where like, let's say this is your bed, and then you can see the ocean right outside of your window.
That's pretty. Did they discover like new food?
Yes, they did. So they had to discover that. That's like another adaptation, because they probably they had to kind of start from scratch, and they brought seeds of certain plants that maybe they weren't exactly plants, but they were similar, but they didn't need as much light to survive.
Okay.
If any. So you can imagine it was dark at first, but I mean, they probably brought stuff to make a fire, or could find it down there as well. But it was pretty hard to grow food.
Okay.
But it's probably mostly like root vegetables, you know? Like potatoes. And
Yoshis were okay with that?
Yoshis actually weren't okay with that. Yoshis hate potatoes. So Yoshis had to find out a way to keep their apples. And how do you make apples grow underground? Well,
They do something like that on Yoshi Island?
Well, on Yoshi Island, there actually is the sun.
Yeah, but do they do something in water?
Yeah, because because they're probably close to the sea, right? So as soon as they found the water, maybe they could get it so that the sunlight kind of refracts on the water. So like, let's say this is the sun, and then you can see it, and then it can let the plant grow. So that was how they got light to grow food.
Were the Yoshis here different from the Yoshis that you see on Yoshi Island?
Yes, they are, because these are map Yoshis, which are the kind that can die, versus lab Yoshis, which are pretty much immune to everything.
Do they have different personalities, or?
Personalities? Well, I mean, yes, they do, but it's like varied across. There's different types of Yoshis. Like there's rebellious types of Yoshis that would like try to split off from the Yovarians, right? Or weren't happy with them. And the people there too were, of course, different. And eventually, this civilization ended up lasting about 1,000 years until it was finally discovered by the people above ground. And that must have been a pretty interesting encounter. I thank you for watching the podcast. I'll see you next week.
Thank you.